Okay, so now we've learnt the what's of NOI. NOI equals revenue minus expenses. We've gone through some exclusions, especially in expenses. You could stop there and be perfectly well and good with that definition of it. I always like to dive into more of the why. What are we trying to achieve by knowing NOI? Again, it's not necessary for you to know, but in commercial real estate, understanding why we do certain things will really help you in subjective cases as you get on with your commercial real estate career. So the question I like to ask to understand why we use NOI is, how much money does a property produce in 1 year, irrespective of the owner? How much money does a property produce in 1 year, irrespective of the owner? So in other words, if you remove the owner out of the equation and think of the property as in its own bubble, how much money, how much profit does that property produce annually? So think about that question. What we're trying to do here is find an apples to apples approach to comparing two different properties. So if we take the example, property A produces $50,000 per year NOI, revenue after expenses. And we have property B, which produces $60,000 per year in NOI. Now, all things being equal, which one would you prefer? They're exact same build, exact same condition, exact same layouts. They're right next door to each other on the exact same size lot. Which one would you prefer? One makes $50,000 and one makes $60,000. It's not a trick question. The answer is B. That is assuming that you do like more money over less money. I'm going to make that assumption to you right now. But you prefer B. It makes $10,000 more than property A. So now we're going to get into one of our exclusions, which was mortgage payments. And you may have been wondering from the previous video, why do we exclude mortgage payments? It's a very common expense that almost every property owner, commercial property owner, has to make. We remember our question, how much money does a property produce 1 year, irrespective of the owner? Keep that in mind. But let's go back to our example of property A and property B. So let's say both property owners pay $1 million for their properties, both exactly $1 million each, okay? Property owner A pays his in cash. So he has $1 million in cash and he purchases property A, which makes the $50,000. Property owner B gets a loan. He uses our L in the ideal acronym and he puts down $250,000. The bank lends the other $750,000 to make the $1 million purchase price. And he gets that loan at 5% interest, okay? So I'm trying to keep this example very simplistic. Now let's calculate how much money each owner takes from the property in a year. So investor A takes home how much? $50,000. We already know his income was $50,000, so he takes home $50,000. Investor B, how much does he take home? He takes home, I already did the math before, $22,500. Because remember, he got a loan at 5%. He's making monthly payments at a 5% annual interest rate. So he had to make total payments for the year of $37,500. So now if we take those and we ask our question like we did before, which would you prefer? Property A, which makes $50,000, or property B, which makes $22,500? You may be inclined to say, hey, property A looks better on the surface, but that's only after we've taken into consideration the owner and his circumstances. One chose to get a loan, the other chose to pay cash. That is not apples to apples. Remember, we're trying to get an apples to apples comparison between two properties. Going back to our question at the very start of the video, how much money does a property produce in 1 year irrespective of the owner? If we include the financing terms of the property, we are considering the owner in that equation. Remember what we said, we want to ask how much income the property produces in a bubble. If we're introducing an external factor such as a loan payment, that breaks that question apart, and we're not able to get that apples to apples comparison that we're looking for. So that is a long way of explaining why we do not include mortgage payments in expenses. It's not the property itself that is producing that expense. It is an external factor, which is the owner. So we want to look at how the property performs in a bubble. So good litmus test, would the income expense on the property still occur with a different owner? So if you're ever questioning why should I include an expense in the NOI, ask the question, would the income or expense on the property still occur with a different owner? If you got a different owner on board, you sold the property, would that expense still occur, in other words? And is this a regularly occurring income or expense? Remember, it needs to be regularly recurring, so annually or a shorter time period. If the answer is yes to both, we include it in NOI. So if the answer is yes to both, we include it in net operating income. So that is a bit more of the essence of why we use NOI and what we're trying to achieve by using it. You can use that litmus test for other scenarios that may come up. Some may not be readily apparent, but now you kind of get the idea of what we're trying to achieve here. And from there, you're able to really ask yourself the question, should I include this as a revenue or expense item that contributes to NOI?